everybody. I'm Evie Roberts, and this is my podcast, Talking in the Dark. Welcome. The aim of this podcast is to raise awareness about blindness, visual impairment, and disability in general, in a happy and light-hearted way. For those of you that don't know, I am blind. I was born with a condition called bilateral anophthalmia. Try spelling that one. It basically means that when I was born, my eyes didn't develop properly, so I wear prosthetics instead. The goal of this podcast is to remove some of the stigma and stereotypes around disabilities, whilst also having fun at the same time. Each week, I will be interviewing people from all walks of life, including some with hidden or physical disabilities like mine, and getting to know a little bit more about them and the lives they lead. This week, I am very excited to tell you that I will be talking to actor and star of the Little Big Things musical, Ed Larkin. My name is Evie Roberts, and this is my podcast, Talking in the Dark. Welcome. Hi Ed, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, Evie? Okay.
Yeah, really good, thank you. How's your day going so far?
Yeah, really nice, thank you. I'm just away on a family holiday, so yeah, it's been super chilled and really lovely. Yeah.
Oh, that sounds amazing. Where are you on holiday?
I'm just kind of outside Shropshire, in a little village called Clun. It's kind of in the middle of nowhere, but it's really beautiful, so it's a nice time to kind of get away.
Oh my gosh, that sounds brilliant. I can imagine that must be like a really nice break for you from, your sort of busy schedule normally. And I think family holidays are such a great thing to be a part of as well.
Yeah, for sure. It's really nice to kind of just have some time away with the family and just kind of have some nice, relaxing time. Yeah, it's been really, really nice.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for agreeing to come on the podcast, especially whilst you're on holiday as well. It's so lovely to meet you.
No worries. Absolute pleasure to be here.
Right, well, such an honor to have you again. And so, sort of to begin with, I know that, like me, you have a disability. So, could you tell me a little bit about that?
Sure. So I was born with cerebral palsy, which was from birth. I was 7 weeks premature, and during the pregnancy, or kind of before birth, I had a bleed in the brain, which caused my disability, which affects kind of the lower half of my body, which means I'm unable to walk, so I use a wheelchair full time. And then it kind of affects a little bit of my upper body, but it's predominantly my lower body that affects. So yeah, I'm a full-time wheelchair user, and I've had cerebral palsy from birth. Yeah.
Right, okay. And obviously, having a disability from birth, I can imagine that you kind of get used to having that disability. But how would you say it kind of like impacts your daily life?
Sure. I mean, to be honest, you kind of touched on it a little bit there. I mean, because I've had it from kind of birth and it's all I know, I've kind of not got much to compare it to, and I kind of just have embraced it because it's all I know. But I think it just affects me kind of in you just got to think a bit more practically in terms of places you're going to or kind of planning out your day, really. But I'm very fortunate that most things don't really affect me. I'm pretty much fully independent apart from my ability to walk. So most of the time, it doesn't really affect me. And because it's all I know, I've kind of just adapted accordingly and it doesn't really bother me. So in that sense, I'm very thankful, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So you are, of course, an incredible actor, but where does your love of acting stem from, and what made you want to pursue it as a career?
I mean, it kind of happened quite naturally. I remember I was very young. I think I was seven or eight, and my parents were really like keen for me to like find a hobby and like find some friends and stuff and like get a friendship group and just a thing that I enjoyed doing. Because at the time I didn't really particularly know what I wanted to do or what I enjoyed. So it was kind of, I think they just wanted me to get me out there a bit and gain me some confidence. And from that, they just found me a drama club that was on a Friday in the local town called All Out Performing Arts. And that was every Friday. And I did that from kind of 8 all the way through till I was about 18. And that was kind of when I first started to enjoy acting. I didn't initially take it very seriously, but I kind of really enjoyed it. Also from All Out, I think it was around 7 or 8. Um, over the summer, they did a thing called a summer school where we'd go for the week, Monday to Friday, and it'd be a brand new show, and with all these kids, and they'd cast it and you'd perform it to family and friends on that Friday evening. And that was kind of oh, this is really fun, but I didn't take it very seriously at the time. I enjoyed it, but it was not much more than a hobby. Um, and then just from there, because I enjoyed it so much, I kind of just did it naturally and progressed through kind of school years. So did it kind of, all the way through up to GCSEs, and then did my GCSEs, carried on studying it for A levels, um, took a gap year, and then I went and studied at a university in Plymouth. So it kind of just happened kind of naturally, and then was fortunate enough to get my agent, and it's kind of snowballed from there. So yeah, I would say it kind of just happened yeah, quite naturally and normally, and it just kind of step by step has grown into a place where I can very fortunately call it a career. And at the moment, to be able to call it a job is really amazing. So it kind of just happened, and I'm very glad that it did.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And yeah, it sounds like it all sort of fell into place really nicely from it being something that you did as a hobby and as a bit of an escape to you sort of taking it more seriously and then sort of having it as a career. It sounds like it was a really nice sort of journey from A to B really. But I'm guessing from that then that obviously your parents signing you up to that drama club was quite a big part of the career that you have now.
Oh, for sure, for sure. I mean, I don't think they knew what would come of it. They thought, oh, this would be quite nice for him to do, I think. But it was definitely a big part. Without that, and maybe I wouldn't have fell in love with it, and I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. So it's definitely a big thanks to them, and also for them encouraging me. They've always been a big encouragement in terms of me doing my acting. They've never kind of, obviously, it's quite a scary career, and it's not always the most stable, but um, thanks to them, they've been super supportive, which has enabled me to kind of just go for it and not be too scared, because it is sometimes a bit of a scary and daunting industry to kind of try and throw yourself into. So having their support has been really massive, and has enabled me to kind of just go for it. So definitely very thankful for them. I'm thankful for them for signing me up when I was 8 years old. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned there about if they hadn't signed you up to it, you might be doing something different now. And that's something I was actually going to talk to you about,
Mm.
actually. Is like, do you think if they hadn't signed you up to it, I mean, where do you think you would be now if that hadn't been something you started doing?
Do you know, I really don't know, to be honest, because I'm sure I'd be doing something, but it just became such a big part of my life that like I can't really envision what else I would be doing, because it was something I just kind of fell in love with, and kind of developed the skills over the years, and it's just a thing that I've kind of grown to love. I mean, potentially, hobbies wise anyway, potentially sport, because that was quite a big part of my life, and became another large part of my life later on. So potentially some sport maybe. But yeah, to be honest, I'm not too sure. So I'm very glad that it happened the way it did.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously you mentioned there about kind of your parents being a real encouragement to you. And this is something I actually talk about with a lot of my guests about having that support network around you
Mm.
and having those people who will pick you up when you're down, but equally believe in you and believe that you can do the things that you're aspiring to do. So,
Mm.
how important would you say it is to have that support network?
I think it is really important in any walk of life, whatever you're doing, to kind of have, it doesn't matter who it is, whether it's family, whether it's found family, friends, teachers, colleagues, whoever it is, just to have people in your corner to kind of tell you that it's all going to be okay, and you can do what you want to do, and they're going to help you towards your goal, I think is really important. And it's something on reflection, probably something that we shouldn't take for granted, because having those people is very special, um, and can be needed. So yeah, definitely, it's important for sure.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. And I think you're right about sometimes taking that support network that we have for granted. I think it's sometimes just something we accept without question, without thinking about the fact that possibly not all people have that, and so that the people that do are extremely lucky to have it.
For sure, absolutely. I think, yeah, it's important if you are fortunate enough to have that strong support network, like really, yeah, really make the most of it, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously, your kind of acting journey started as a hobby and just something you didn't really take very seriously, but did because you enjoyed it. And I think even that's important. Like, obviously, for you, acting then turned into a career, but even just having a hobby, something that you maybe don't take very seriously, but do for fun and have as a bit of an escape for you, I think that's really important to have.
For sure. I think definitely I think especially growing up, like finding a thing that you can kind of cling on to and finding people that you kind of get and kind of involved in is really important. I also think like as a disabled young person, like finding that thing that you can really like get involved in and kind of is an escape is also really important. That was the case for me with also with sport. I got involved in wheelchair rugby from quite an early age, and that was a really good outlet as well as my acting. But I think yeah, acting was a big escape, and I think obviously for anyone, those kind of early years, pre-teen is very fundamental years. But I think as a disabled young person, they are also incredibly fundamental years, and you kind of you personally anyway, you think about a lot and you kind of unpack a lot because you're kind of finding out who you are and that and disability does come into that in kind of processing who you are as a person. So having that hobby and that kind of escape from those things growing up was like super important. And I'm really glad that I had that thing that I just love to do, that I kind of didn't have to think about school and the stresses of anything. You could kind of just have a bit of fun, which is important, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I can definitely think, like you say, especially when you're a preteen and a teenager.
Mm.
I mean, if we just think about school, I mean, the workload gets more difficult. You may start to struggle a little bit more with friend groups, especially in that transition to high school where like you go from like a class of 30 kids to like a whole year group and finding who you are, finding your group, finding your clique. And so yeah, I think being able to have something that can help you unwind and get like not have to think about all those emotions, I think that's really important. Like you say, especially in those like preteen teenage years.
Yeah, absolutely agree. It's super important. And very, very glad that I had something that really I could kind of find as an escape. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, you say about that escape there. I mean, do you still see acting as an escape now that you do it as a career?
I, I don't know. Yeah, I think so because I still love it so much. But I think I do have to kind of have it look at it in a different way. Um, with because yeah, at the end of the day, it's my work. So I think I still find it super enjoyable, and I'm so glad that I get to call it something that I do for a job. But I think you just have to start approaching it slightly differently. Um, so yes, in some ways, but then in other ways, you kind of just have to shift how you look at it. But it's certainly something I still absolutely love, and I'm very glad that I get to call it work, to be honest.
Yeah, of course. So we've talked a lot about how you got into acting, but now I suppose we should probably talk about your career in itself. So you played Henry Fraser in the West End production of The Little Big Things. So can you tell me a bit about what that experience was like for you?
Yeah, of course. I mean, to be honest, it was crazy. It was absolutely crazy. It was a very long process. I became attached to the show about 2 years ago. Um, and I just had some self tapes through from my agent. And originally, I didn't know that it was a musical because all I got was some acting sides, some acting scenes. So I just sent them off. And then on the off chance they came back to me and said, "Oh, they've just asked if you can sing. Could you send them a tape of a song of your choice?" And thankfully they thought I could. So I kind of went from there. And then I was involved in a series of workshops from the show where we kind of had a look at it and kind of they developed it. But even then, you're doing these workshops with the creatives and with the music, but we still didn't know if it was happening because the industry, a lot of these things is a quite a long, lengthy process. So we were doing all these things and committing to it, but we had no idea whether it'd end up becoming a production. And then once the last workshop happened and it got greenlit and we found out that it was going to be a production and then I got cast, it was a massive joy. Um, and a kind of, yeah, really exciting because it was a long build up to it and we'd all been working quite hard on the production prior to it becoming a thing. So it was amazing. And just I think the fact that it was a musical for me was absolutely crazy because I didn't train in musical theatre. I trained in straight acting, if you like. I always did singing and I always loved singing and that was kind of a big part of me growing up. But I didn't see myself involved in musical theatre just because the landscape of the industry, how it was before this show, I think there wasn't that didn't feel like there was that much room for somebody like me in the West End in musical theatre. So the fact that it transpired to be a musical and people seemed to enjoy it as much as they did was an incredible honor. And it's still the craziest thing I've ever done. And I finished it in March, but I still pinch myself thinking, oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened. So yeah, it was an absolute joy. Yeah, amazing.
Oh, I mean, that sounds absolutely incredible. And yeah, I bet that after all that work, after putting all that work in and how lengthy the process was, finding out that you've been cast and that you got the part and that that work was all sort of for something, I bet that that must have been just like the best feeling in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. It really was. And kind of not that expected. You kind of just do these things, and I've learned more and more because, you could do a lot of auditions, but most of them you don't end up doing, or you don't get the jobs. So you kind of have to take everything you do with a little bit of pinch of salt, being like, this is cool, but you never quite know what's going to come. So the fact that that call came in and that they wanted me and the show itself was going to go ahead was super exciting. And also, I just felt really happy for the creative team because I got to know them over that time. And it was a real passion project. And the fact that the show got to open cold in the West End without any prior productions, because quite commonly in a lot of shows, which you might know this, but a lot of shows kind of have runs in other places before they hit the West End, because that's
Mm.
considered kind of the pinnacle, if you like, to a lot of media. That's considered kind of a big place to end up. So a lot of them start out earlier in regional theatres, or they might do the Edinburgh Fringe. But the fact that this show opened cold to no audiences in the West End, and the fact that they wanted it to happen and the producers let it happen was a real honor. And yeah, I just felt very, very blessed and very lucky to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it all sounds absolutely amazing. So the production involved a number of actors with disabilities. So
Mhm.
what kind of impact do you think that that sort of collaboration and sort of wider representation of disabled actors had on the cast and crew?
Yeah, I think it had a big impact. I remember it was day one of rehearsals, and we were in the theatre rehearsal space upstairs in the theatre, and we went into the room, and there were many, many creative team and different people involved in the production. But I heard somebody say, and one of the wheelchair users actually said, this is the most disabled creatives I've seen in one room in a long time. So there was kind of us as performers, our understudies, and the dramaturg, Nikki Miles Wilding, who used to work for Grey Eye. Um, and she's also a wheelchair user. So the fact that we had so many disabled creatives and so many disabled influences in the room was absolutely, yeah, it was really amazing. And we all kind of sat back and went, oh wow, this really feels like a groundbreaking production, not just for the story, but just for like the people involved. Like it was a really amazing thing. And to say it was happening in London in the West End, in quite a commercial setting was super, super cool.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, with there being so many, um, people with disabilities working on the show, I mean, was there sort of like a kind of camaraderie there with you all sort of being in the same place, having a disability, and kind of knowing what everyone else was going through?
For sure. I think we all just felt incredibly proud, kind of knowing what the show could do. Obviously, and at that time it was an unknown quantity. You can kind of get a bit biased in rehearsal room and think you've got the most amazing thing, but who knows what people are actually going to think about it until it's put on. So we thought we had something special, but we didn't quite know how much people would love it, and I'm very glad that people did. But yeah, it was an amazing thing. Yeah, it was just amazing to see so many disabled creatives in the room, and we felt like it's a step in the right direction. I think we all felt very proud that we could be part of a company that was pushing boundaries and telling a story that was a disabled story that needed to be told. So yeah, it was super rewarding and very exciting and kind of mind blowing, kind of the impact it might have. Also, you're talking about the impact in the rehearsal room. Day one, which was absolutely amazing, the director said, before we do anything, before we look at the script or anything, we're going to have some time to kind of learn about disability because obviously there was a few disabled cast members, but not everyone was. And the director was super keen on getting everyone in the same level playing field in terms of knowledge of disability. So Nikki, the dramaturg, who's a wheelchair user, she led a workshop on the model of disability and kind of talked about that to the rest of the company. And then we also had a lady, I can't remember her name now, but she was um, fully deaf. And she led a workshop on kind of integrating what it is to work in a room with someone who might be hard of hearing or deaf, because both the assistant choreographer and the choreographer are both diagnosed as either hard of hearing or deaf. So what was really cool was that before anything happened in the creative room, before we did a read through, before we'd sung anything, day one, there was two workshops based around disability. So everybody in the room was kind of, and the director kind of knew what this was. There was no big elephant in the room. It was all discussed, and everyone can kind of move forward with the knowledge and the right words and the right things to talk about. So that was super cool that they really wanted it to be an open conversation, and disability wasn't a weird topic or people weren't kind of scared to ask questions. It was kind of an open floor to learn, everybody to learn and kind of say, this is a disabled story with disabled performers. Let's just have an open conversation, which was super cool. Really, really cool to see.
Oh my gosh, I mean, that sounds amazing. And I think it's so important that you guys as a company did that because, like you say, it meant that everyone was on a level playing field and everyone had the same understanding, whether they'd encountered disability or not. It meant that, you could just all, like you say, have an open conversation about it, and everyone was of the same understanding. And I just think that's such an important thing to do.
Absolutely. It was super important. And I'm very glad that it happened the way it did. And I think the rest of the company were as well. Because I mean, having talked to some of the company members post the show or during the rehearsals, I think there was a bit of trepidation around it because disability isn't that spoken about. And if you've not come into contact with a disability, people might be kind of wrongly, but fair enough that people can be kind of a bit nervous around it. So I think the fact that it was just kind of an open conversation was really helpful for the rest of the cast, and it kind of made everyone feel comfortable, and didn't feel kind of nervous about saying the wrong thing, which was really lovely.
Yeah, absolutely. And I completely agree with what you said there about disability not being something that's really spoken about. I think it's talked about more now than it was, a few
Mm,
years ago. From what I've learned from my guests anyway. Obviously, I can't say how it was sort of 20 or 30 years ago, but from what I've learned, I think it's more spoken about now.
for sure.
Um, and obviously, there are still steps that need to be taken in the future to ensure that disability in a few years is just, sort of a normal part of society. It's not questioned. But equally, when you look at things like the Little Big Things and what you guys did there with just with including so many disabled performers and crew, it's like, well, yeah, we are definitely getting somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was a real pleasure to kind of be involved in that company and kind of break some boundaries and have honest conversations and expose people to like a disabled story because there's a little bit in TV and film, but theatre there's not been that many disabled stories portrayed, especially commercially in something like the West End. So it felt like a real honor to be able to tell this story and open up people's eyes to the possibilities surrounding disability and the honest stories and honest truths about living with a disability. So yeah, it felt really amazing for sure. I mean, there was a sense of like being proud, but also a sense of kind of frustration that we were kind of the first story of its kind really to be told in musical theatre in the West End. And obviously to be the first lead in for me was amazing. But there was a sense of kind of it's 2023 at the time. Why is it taken this long for someone like me to be seen on these stages? But that didn't diminish from how proud everyone felt. But there was a bit of a weird feeling of kind of like I'm so glad it's me, but it's a shame that it is. Do you know what I mean?
Mm. Mm. Yeah, I completely get what you mean. It's like, yeah, I mean, yeah, I completely get it. I mean, like you say, it was 2023 at the time. Why has it taken this long for a story like this to be represented on stage? And it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant that it has been represented on stage. But it's like, why is it happening now? Why didn't it happen, say, 5 or 10 years ago?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, these things these things can take time, and I'm glad that they are happening. And hopefully, this show opens up further conversations about what's possible for disabled people. But yeah, there was a sense of kind of, come on now, we kind of we should have had our act together by now. But I'm very proud that I got to tell it either way. So yeah.
Yeah, of course. So the show took place at the Soho Place Theatre in London, which I believe has great accessibility. Now, I know that lots of West End theatres don't have great accessibility backstage. Would you say this is often sort of a contributing factor in theatre roles for disabled actors?
Definitely. Absolutely. I think, yeah, there is not that many spaces in London that have accessible spaces, accessible theatres. And that also was the reason why Little Big Things was perfect for Soho Plays. And there's been a lot of people that have asked us kind of at stage door, kind of, where's it going next? And there was comments online, will it transfer? And maybe any other show with how well we were fortunate it did in the end, maybe it would transfer to another space. But unfortunately, the Little Big Things, that Soho Place was one of the only spaces it could go to, due to its kind of access behind stage, and on stage. So yeah, that it's definitely a big contributing factor in terms of stories that can be told and casts that can be cast. That if a disabled actor can't use the space, then they're not going to be able to be cast. They could be the best person in the room, but if they can't get on the stage, then unfortunately, they're not going to be doing it. So you're right. You're absolutely right. I think it really is a big factor, and I'm not too sure what the answer is apart from crazy, crazy expensive builds. But then you've got issues with kind of listed buildings and things. So that there's a lot of questions about what needs to be done. Stuff needs to be done, but how we go about it is certainly a big thing for the theatre industry to think about.
Yeah, I know what you mean there. And I think, yeah, you are right. I mean, the thing that immediately jumps to my mind is there are so many, the stories that probably could be told on stage and would work really well on stage, but may not be able to right now because there are so few theatres that are accessible.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think there's a wealth of disabled performers and a wealth of disabled stories that could have, or that are written that we don't know about, that could have take up these spaces, but unfortunately, yeah, there's at the moment there's not really the infrastructure in place for disabled writers, disabled performers to be involved in these spaces. Um, Actually thinking about that, Nikki, who I mentioned earlier, who used to work with Grey Eye, who was our dramaturg on the show, she mentioned actually to me that she writes and directs, and a lot of these shows, when you're kind of testing the water with new work, go to kind of fringe theatre festivals or kind of little venues, and a lot of these little venues are like in pubs or like in a basement or things like that. So she said to me, she said, there's a lot of work that I want to try out, but I can't go to these kind of unassuming fringe things because there's no space for me. So sometimes they have to really risk it and try and go bigger. So they don't have that opportunity to kind of play with things and kind of do stuff on a smaller scale. Because unfortunately, a lot of these spaces aren't particularly disabled accessible.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I would imagine, and with that as well, because you have to go sort of straight to these bigger venues, it's almost like taking a leap of faith. You don't have much room for error because you don't have the ability to play with things on a smaller scale before you sort of go for a bigger venue.
For sure, for sure. And I think that was probably one of the reasons that Little Big Things happened. That Soho Place was built in time, and it was kind of the only venue. And it kind of felt like, at least from my end, if it was going to happen, it had to happen, and it had to be there. So it was a really big risk from the producers to kind of just go for it and take that risk. But thankfully, it paid off. But I can imagine from them, it was kind of a massive leap of faith to kind of put a lot of finances into it and kind of take a risk on this story that no one heard of really, apart from if you'd read the book, which is incredible in itself. And I encourage anyone to read Henry's memoirs. But yeah, it was a big risk. But thankfully, it seemed to have paid off.
Yeah, it definitely has. So, in what ways then would you like to see the TV and theatre industry open up more for disabled actors?
Mm. I think both for both TV and theatre, I'd love to see more roles that aren't written as a disabled role.
Mm.
I'd say, especially with TV at the moment, 90% of the scripts that I get through and I read, fantastic as most of them are, a lot of them are a character that's the reason they're there is because of their disability. A lot of the times they're kind of injured or there's a thing that's happened to them that's kind of dramatic for the plot point that gives the character a reason to be there, which is valid in its own right, and those stories deserve to be told, and that's okay. But it would be really cool to just see a character that doesn't really, their disability isn't really that mentioned. They're just a character, a human in a plot that just happens to use a wheelchair or happens to have some form of disability. So I'd love that to happen more, for sure, for sure. And then also, theatre is getting better. I'd also love to see a bit more opening up in terms of musical theatre, because there hasn't been many, especially physically disabled performers. There's not been that much in musical theatre terms. So that would be really cool to see kind of an openness for that and see where we can go. But yeah, just more variety in characters and some more kind of characters that aren't really written as a disabled character, but just cast disabled performers. That's a big step, but that would be the biggest thing I'd like to see. And if that happens, I think that's when we realize the changes there. If the disability is not really a thing, then we know that the industry is getting there for sure.
Yes, 100%. And I totally agree with you there. I think sometimes when you see disability portrayed, um, it's like the character's main trait is their disability. And
Mhm.
so when you think of that character, you think of the disability more than you do the character. And it's not, it's kind of like not the realist reflection of real life. Because if you think of a disabled person in real life, I mean, they're a human being and they have flaws and positive qualities. They're just a normal human, and
Mhm.
their disability doesn't define them. But often, when you see characters, it's their disability that's their main trait, and they're almost kind of like defined by that. So, I completely agree with you that it would be really lovely to see more characters that are just seen as characters and we don't really have to mention the disability too much.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, it's all good if it kind of gets mentioned subtly, but yeah, it'd be really cool to just kind of see, yeah, shopkeeper number two
Yeah,
from down the road in a TV series that just happened to use a wheelchair and it's not really mentioned. Would be super cool.
yeah, that'd be great, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
So, do you have a preference for stage or screen?
Oh, blimey, that's a tough one. I mean, I have more experience with stage, and in actor training, you're predominantly taught stage work and kind of how to do theatre work. So I'd probably lean towards that because of the immediacy of the audience and the response you get. But at the same time, like TV and film is really valuable as well because it's often on larger scales, and the stories you get to tell is really exciting. Also, the idea of working on a really big thing where you're kind of a small cog in a very big wheel is a really cool feeling. To feel like you're kind of a part of a bigger thing is also super exciting. They're kind of very different ways of performing as well. So it's kind of very two different styles, but I think they're both equally as valid. But if I had to, um, in terms of something that I love, I think it'd probably have to be theatre for sure.
Yeah, I can totally imagine. You kind of briefly mentioned earlier that sport is a very big part of your life, sort of just as much as acting is. And
Mhm.
you also mentioned that from quite a young age, actually, you've played wheelchair rugby.
Mhm.
So can you tell me a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah. So as I briefly mentioned earlier, yeah, wheelchair rugby and sport was a really big part of my life growing up, kind of alongside acting. I kind of found the two at kind of the same points in my life growing up, which was a super big release, as acting has been. But yeah, so I started doing wheelchair rugby. I found that started doing that about 14 years old, with my club, my local club that had just been set up at the time called the West Country Hawks, down in Devon. Um, and yeah, we I kind of just trained there regularly, and then I'm still there, and I've been kind of training ever since. I've been doing it for quite a few years now, and I was very fortunate for a little while, a couple of years ago, to be involved in the GB talent squad, which is kind of the reserves, if you like, or the development squad for the GB national team, which was super amazing, and it meant that I got to do some really cool things and travel to a couple of countries and play and put on the GB jersey, which was a super amazing honor. So yeah, it was a massive part of my life, that I've kind of still do, but kind of just at club level now, and I'm not doing it in the elite sport side of things anymore, just because of the commitments with acting and how I've got to kind of prioritize my career now. But for a while, rugby was a massive part of my life.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it definitely sounds like it, and it makes sense that obviously you don't do it as much anymore. But I mean, that sounds amazing being part of the GB talent squad. I bet that that must have been, such an amazing experience to have.
Oh, absolutely. It was super cool. And just to kind of to be around people that I'd kind of admired. Kind of growing up, even before I started sport, like watching things like the Paralympics was such a massive thing, London 2012 and beyond. Like wheelchair rugby is such a small knit community that I've been able to kind of play alongside and train with some of these amazing people that I've kind of grown up to idolize. So just from that point of view, it's been a really amazing experience. And also just getting to work and play alongside like other disabled people has been like really amazing, and we've had a lot of shared kind of experiences and kind of shared things that we kind of understand in each other's lives, which is super cool and super important to kind of have that disabled network as well. Was really cool. Yeah, just wheelchair rugby was amazing, and getting to travel abroad. I was fortunate enough to go to a couple of countries. Went to places like Denmark and Poland, and a couple of years ago, before I finished my last tournament, I was in Alabama, Birmingham, Alabama, in the USA. So yeah, absolutely incredible time, and very thankful that I got to experience it. Yeah, incredible.
Yeah, it sounds brilliant. And I mean, do you think that obviously you mentioned there about getting to play alongside other disabled individuals? Do you think that those kind of shared experiences that you all have brings you closer as a team?
Yeah, for sure. I think having a common goal and having common ground as a group is really important. And no matter a disability, I think we all just had this shared understanding of stuff that you have to go through, and the process of dealing with it, whether you are injured or whether you were born with your disability. There's kind of a lot of shared experiences that we can kind of talk about if it comes up, or just there's just like an unsaid knowledge that we kind of get each other, which is super cool. And that's what's really cool about the disabled community, I think, is that we just kind of we have this unspoken thing of like, no matter what you've been through, like I get you, which is super cool.
Yeah, definitely. That's one of the things I love as well. It's almost
Mm.
like sort of unspoken, like it's almost like an unspoken bond of no matter what your disability is and kind of where you are in life and how you got to that point. It's just like, yeah, I get what you're going through. We might not have the exact same challenges, but I get it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important that you have that disabled community. And I'm really glad I did. Because it kind of, I think that more than anything, as much as acting as an escape, in terms of me coming to terms with my disability, I think wheelchair rugby was a massive part of it, because I was around other disabled young people and adults, and I could kind of see their journeys and what they'd gone through and how they get to it. And it made me come to terms way way easier than maybe it might have without that. So definitely thankful for it in that terms of kind of processing my disability. It really helped me being alongside fellow disabled people for sure.
Yeah, 100%. So, what would you say then has been your proudest moment so far?
Oh my gosh, a proudest moment so far. Um, to be probably the little big things, I think. Um, just for the just for the kind of childhood dream of getting to lead a West End show. Never really thought it would happen to me. So that was kind of such a proud moment. That first preview, I'll never forget it. When we kind of all came out and we had no idea what the show was going to be and if they'd like it. And the reaction in the audience was unlike anything I've ever felt before. And I remember the day after we were in the green room all together with the director kind of having a debrief of being like, blimey, that was quite a lot. And one of the actors, incredible actors, Lindsay Haley. She's a massive West End performer. She's super experienced, has done many shows. Um, and I kind of looked up to her. I was like, "Wow, you're amazing." So the fact that I was working with her was incredible as well. But she said, I've done this for many years, and I've not had an evening or a theatre that sounded like that in a very long time." So it was to hear her say that, and she's been very much a seasoned veteran of the industry. For her to be kind of blown away by it was an amazing thing. So I'll kind of treasure that first night forever. I think it was pretty special.
Oh my gosh, I mean, that sounds absolutely amazing. So, sort of looking forward to the future, then, do you have any sort of goals or aspirations for the future that you would like to achieve?
Yeah, I don't know about big goals, but I think I've always said this. I think I'd love to just be able to keep working and to kind of be able to be fortunate enough to keep my career being the thing that, makes me financially stable. So from a very practical point of view, I think I would just love to be able to just keep doing what I'm doing and to continue that being my career would be an amazing thing. More kind of specifically, I think I'd love to do a bit more TV and film if I can. Um, yeah, and then potentially some more theatre. Kind of my one of my dream roles, kind of bucket list roles would be Richard III because I love Shakespeare. I did a little bit of it in my first year at university. We did a regional tour of Julius Caesar, which was really cool. But so I think doing something like Richard III or working with the RSC would be definitely a big bucket list tick for me for sure.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, I wish you the very best of luck with all your goals for the future. And I mean, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I mean, you're such an incredible person and you've done so many amazing things. And I've just really enjoyed talking to you. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I mean, it's been such an honor to meet you. And yeah, I've just really enjoyed our chat.
Oh, thank you so much, Evie. It's been really nice. Thank you. It's been a pleasure chatting to you and getting to meet you as well. It's been so lovely. Thank you for having me.
Oh, no worries. And thank you so much again. And thank you to my audience for listening. And I will see you all next time.